Hey guys, I'm Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com, and we are now starting the functionality portion of High Power University, and this starts an entirely new module, and we're going to take this in, we hope, the most logical order possible, and that is starting back at the very beginning. And among our demonstration pistols, we have one that appears to have been made by FN in Belgium, and based on the serial number, it would have been among the first 7,500 high powers ever made. And it appears by the markings it must have been the Argentinian police that made this order. It is the original internal extractor model. We know that because we have this appearance of this, it's actually a sear pin, but no external extractor. So this is where the high power pistol began, and we are actually going to be referring to a schematic from the FN factory that we have. And by the way, at BHSpringSolutions, these demonstration posters that we have, these are actually available and suitable for framing. As you see, this is a high resolution print of the actual schematic for the high power pistol that hung on the wall inside the factory at FN for we don't know how long. But we were very, very grateful to have something like this handed to us, and we will be using this because this is really where it all started. And you'll see on our version of this, we have John Browning and we have Diodone Save, and the two designers credited with the original configuration of the high power pistol. Later on, we added Leon Hubert as a co-inventor after he made numerous changes, really the most revolutionary changes that the high power ever really experienced. But John Browning and Diodone Save are both credited for the high power pistol. And I just want to build one premise right from the very, very beginning. Diodone Save did understand that he was like the basketball player following Michael Jordan. It's just impossible to do that. And we are convinced that he was clearly conscious of this. In finishing the high power pistol, we think that it's obvious that Diodone Save in good faith wanted to do this effort justice for John Browning, who had started the pistol originally. And this combination, when you think about it, and you think about the high powers lines and all of the radiuses that this pistol has that are just elegant and beautiful, this was, how do I say this? This kind of elegance and beauty in a handgun was really the next step or the next evolution as Diodone Save saw it in John Browning's invention and design legacy, if you will. And what makes the high power, we believe, so unique is Diodone Save just knocked it out of the park. In every possible way, almost, just knocked it out of the park. And he knocked it out of the park in a way that did not have a lot of regard for how expensive is this pistol going to be to make in real life. In the beginning of the high power pistol, that didn't matter too much because there wasn't much competition, so it was worth what it took to make it and have a reasonable profit and sell it, and it was worth it to the end user. When you're the baddest thing in the picture, in the industry, in the terms of a handgun, this wasn't the foremost thing on his mind, and that kind of becomes obvious with the changes that FN incorporated into the high power in the years ahead, many of which were production cost optimizing, if you will, reasoned changes and or modifications. But at this time, this was, if you have seen I'm going to point to two things. The incredibly talented engravers in Liège who made the kind of the ultra premium high-end, definitely like super heirloom engraved grade Browning high powers. And I'm talking about, these were like the $4,000, $7,000, $10,000 high powers that Browning sold very limited numbers of, and the exterior of these high powers was all hand engraved like the old-fashioned tap, 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 and that's crazy. Artistic level work in metal, and this marriage is almost, it is absolute fate that John Browning from Utah, USA, and a guy looking for a new bicycle design or something from FN, these guys cross paths. And the FN guy goes back to Belgium and tells about this inventor that he met. And that's the tale, or the history, I guess, of how that started. However it started, this was a profound kind of marriage. And when you think about it, when John Browning passed away in the same town that Leon Hubert lives in today, Liège, which is just down the road from Erstal, John Browning was in his own office in Liège, and the Browning Arms Company still has a facility of its own nearby in that area, which I never knew until we were driven past it one time on one of our visits to Belgium. And really, when John Browning passed away, the high power pistol was kind of anybody's game if they wanted to finish it. The Browning Arms Company was an entity and in business. FN was an entity and in business. John Browning was working on it at his own facility. So, you know, this was just an unfinished song at this stage. My belief is that if Dieudonné Save had not finished this handgun called the High Power, it would not have ever been born as we know it today. And largely due to this very artistic grade influence in Belgium. And you know, even still today, when you go there, there are echoes of what I'm talking about. You know, it's kind of like the songwriter who wants to go spend a lot of time on Beale Street in Memphis or on Music Row in Nashville. This was the mecca for, you know, this artistic bend on what you could do with a firearm in terms of beautification and art. And Dieudonné Save was from this neighborhood, and it is just, it shows so much in the whole high power design, just front to back and top to bottom. And that's the first thing that that I wanted to say is if the high power pistol had an Achilles heel from the get-go, it was this guy just did not he did not hold anything back. Dieudonné Save didn't when he finished this handgun. And even though, you know, granted, the high power pistol may have been supremely 100% perfect inside and out if John Browning would have finished it, you know, but this motivation that Dieudonné Save had when he undertook this project of finishing this handgun and where he was from, and having had been as somewhat of an understudy to John Browning also, this was, we believe, history's only fate-based finisher of the high power possible at that point. And to Dieudonné Save's credit, he did an excellent, fantastic job. We're going to start in our next session. We're going to start with this high power pistol we believe to be one of the first 7,500 made, and we're going to take it apart. We're going to start with the magazine, and then we're going to go all over the rest of the frame and the slide. You're not going to be looking at me in this position. You're going to be looking more over my shoulder or from up above as we take this handgun apart, and we're going to start by explaining exactly what makes the high power go tick-tock. Every movement, every governing influence of motion and slide velocity and resistance points, and we're going to dig as deep into that as is practical, and we're going to be using this schematic a lot and referring to it quite a bit, and we are going to run this right back up just like the history progression. In other words, to understand the high power and the availability of high powers in the market and the different models and the generations and things and the pluses and minuses and all of that, it really helps if you understand where the high power started and how it was born. And frankly, there's components in the high power, you even have to go back pre-high power to the 1911 to find where some of these components were born. But understanding where these came from and how they evolved, then changed and were modified and got to where the modern day capabilities the high power has today, we think it's going to make everything come in as much more understandable. And what you're going to see is this eternal effort almost on FN's part not to in any way cheapen the quality or cheapen the handgun or in any way sacrifice on anything. To FN's credit, I mean, that is solid to say everything that I just did. However, they did recognize and see that they had a need to try to find more efficiencies in the process of producing this handgun, and surely for just general reasonable profit purposes or competitive purposes, it became apparent rather early in the high powers production that that was a motivating factor that they were facing. John Browning thought very much in three spheres all at once, and we are sure of this. He thought in terms of function, he thought in terms of least number of parts and most cost effective to build and easiest to assemble in the factory. And he had a way of making a marriage out of these three things all at once. And it seemed like he always got the maximum functionality, ease to build, easy to assemble characteristics. It's one of the reasons why the 1911 is still so popular today, because it's a incredibly less expensive and far simpler handgun to build than the high power is. But John Browning thought in all three of these at the same time. Dieudonné Save also did, to his credit, and looking at the example of the FAL rifle. But the pressure of picking up one designer's work and trying to envision where was he going with this and being able to bring it in at this kind of a level is truly a profound thing. Another profound thing about the high power was early on in the high power's history, we saw slots in the grip frame. This was for like a rifle stock butt that you could put up in the pistol, and you'd have a butt stock here. Early in the high power's history, we saw tangent sights where it's elevation adjustable, and it goes out to like 200 yards or something. So they were thinking versatility of use with this handgun. In the later years, Browning did a target model, which truly gave it away that they had a better magazine disconnect device and system for the high power. Granted, it was obviously more expensive to produce than the one that they did for the what we call military and law enforcement pistols, which is most of your high powers ever produced. But they did a target model with an extended barrel and a truly an incredible trigger, like no Browning high power trigger you'll ever see outside of that model, and those are fairly rare. But they have truly a completely different configuration of the magazine disconnect. It's still there, but it has no impact whatsoever on the trigger pull at all. It's been the influence on the trigger got designed around and it no longer has any impact on the trigger whether the magazine is in or out. It doesn't fire when the magazine's out with that configuration. We also saw over the years, Browning made a high power compact, only at about 500 count. They also made a 40 Smith & Wesson model. But the models that we have here on the table run from the original internal extractor to what we would call the classic model. This happens to be an aluminum frame. Then one that we would call a Mark II model. We'll get into this a little bit because it's kind of interesting. It's a 1991 manufacture, and it's truly a Mark II, not a Mark III. This is a 1990 manufacture. It's a Browning. This was, by the way, an FN product that was sold to Israel originally. This is a Browning product originally imported into the United States by Browning from FN. This is 1990. And it is all of the Mark III or Mark III's configuration in it. So FN was in somewhat of a limbo period in the late 80s and early 90s, and it kind of depended on who ordered what and how much they ordered and what was available to finish for Browning at the time. And then we had, in the later years, cast frame Mark III with all of the Mark III embellishments, and this one actually came from the factory with SFS on it. It's a 2003. And with these models, we're going to be able to highlight the significant changes that happened with the high power. There were actually some frame changes that are seldom known about, but we'll be talking about those and just kind of analyzing those and the reason why there was, and that's kind of a little known thing. I don't want to jump ahead of things too far. As we work our way through these, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to disassemble one of the very originals, if you will, and then we will build through the generations from there. I'm Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.